Okay, let's go ahead and get started. So good afternoon, everyone, and good morning to those of you on the West Coast, and welcome as we kick off our three-part webinar series on driving a culture of performance, measure, manage, and hire for culture. And I just want to thank you real quick. I see that we've got almost 300 people here today, so we've got a great audience, so I appreciate you all coming on today. My name is Charles Summers. It is my pleasure to be serving as your moderator today. My goal is to make today's webinar as interactive as possible, so we've gone ahead and added a few fun polls to the discussion today. Also, if you have any questions at any time during today's presentation, please use the GoToWebinar's questions queue. When it makes sense, we'll jump into the questions as we go. We'll also have a 15-minute Q&A at the end. If you'd like to reach out to me about anything Humantelligence or webinar questions or future webinar topics, feel free to reach out to me directly at charles.summers@humantelligence.com or just chat me on LinkedIn. Over the course of the next 2 months, we'll have 3 sessions on the process for driving a culture of performance. The first step in that process is to measure your underlying culture. So in part 1 today, we'll dive into the methods to consider when measuring your culture. In part 2 on Wednesday, February 19th, we'll go into part 2 on using that underlying culture data to better manage and calibrate a performance culture. Then on Wednesday, March 18th, we'll show you how to use this data to hire for your unique cultures at every level of your organization. I want to make sure that you get the most out of your experience with us, so I've put together a handful of items for your success. Most of you have already taken me up on my offer to take the free assessment. This is going to greatly help you visualize what a culture measurement tool looks like, and you may even glean some great personal insights about yourself. If you haven't already taken it, that's okay. I will put a link in my follow-up email, or you can head over to the website at humantelligence.com to take that free assessment. For session 2, we'll do an audience culture mapping of all of our registrants, which will be a fun and interactive exercise. That said, and many of you have already on today's call have already done so, but reach out to me or anyone you are already connected with at Humantelligence about getting a free culture mapping of one of your teams up to 20 people. This exercise will give you insight into how culture can be broken down at the team level and calibrated for performance. Number 3 on there is ask a ton of questions. So we'll have some time again at the end to answer as many questions as we can. And we'll also stop here and there as a question comes up. So we'll, if it relates to the content that we're on the current slide, we'll stop there and answer the question. After today's webinar, I will send a number of materials, including the webinar recording and slides, the free assessment link, and our most recent culture infographic and white paper stemming from our research with hr.com. So take a look through those materials when I send them out later this evening. All right, so I want to kind of kick things off with a little poll. As I mentioned, I want to make this as interactive as possible. So I want to start off with a little poll question here. So give me a moment as I bring that up. Okay, so you should see that now. Looks like it's still distributing. Okay, so it looks like it showed up now. So we'll give everybody about 30 seconds to put their votes in here. Give it about 10 more seconds. Looks like about half of you have put your votes in. Okay, I'm going to close up the poll here. Looks like most of you have your votes in here. Okay, so I'm going to share the results. So you should see the results on your screen right now. So 19% said turnover, 14% said performance, 28% said sourcing and hiring candidates, 32% said engagement, and 8% said HR technology. So a lot of these things are going to be things that we cover over the next 3 webinars. So we just wanted to get a little insight so we understood how to steer the conversation. So appreciate everybody for their answers. Okay, moving on to our next slide here, which is kind of a company overview of what Humantelligence does. So I know some of you are familiar. I see a lot of familiar names on today's call. I just want to give a quick overview. So the Humantelligence platform, it uses a 3-step process to build high-performing cultures. The steps are measure, manage, and hiring. So a lot of what we're going to be talking about is exactly what we do and what we're good at. So first, we measure the underlying behaviors, motivators, and ideal work environment at the individual team and organizational levels. Then we take that data, look at high and low performing individuals and teams, and calibrate a target performance target performance culture. Finally, in step 3, that data is applied to the recruiting side to become more intentional in hiring for culture fit or diversity of thought, depending on your needs. And we've actually coined the phrase Moneyball for HR. So that's what we do. This time, I'd like to introduce you to Humantelligence CEO Juan Betancourt. Juan is a pioneer in culture. He's a Harvard and Wharton Business School graduate. Once in the corporate world at Procter & Gamble, he became fascinated by the strong P&G culture, and at future companies, how culture could lead to success or failure of a team, group, division, or company. For the first 15 years of his post-college career, Juan leveraged his ability to adapt his culture, what Humantelligence measures as EQ, or emotional intelligence. And he was a commercial-minded P&L leader at companies like P&G in both the US and Latin America, managing Tide detergent successfully, then launching Reebok Soccer, leading the famous global turnaround of the sports brand Puma from Germany as the CMO, COO, and head of strategy, then becoming the most senior foreign executive in France at a privately held multi-billion-dollar company, the $140 billion global leader in sports manufacturing retail, Decathlon, where he was responsible for 220,000 employees globally as part of the company's operating committee in France. For the next 10 years of Juan's career, he took his business savvy and moved into HR when he realized business success was all about leadership. So he became an executive search recruiter and the youngest partner at Hendricks & Struggles, and worked at Korn Ferry International, and eventually launched his own executive search firm, Gonza Search, finding C-suite executives for private equity firm portfolio companies. Finally, in 2016, Juan launched Humantelligence to combine his 2 careers of business and people success, focused on what he saw as the most critical area of companies, measuring, managing, and hiring for culture and predictive performance. So at this time, I'm going to kick it over to Juan. So Juan, go ahead and take it away.
I'm going to put my camera on because I have a situation, Charles, and for the 200-300 people, this is my daughter, Aura. I apologize. She's going to be on the call with us. Our nanny canceled this morning, and my wife is a doctor at a hospital, so I had to leave the office to come home. So I appreciate your patience and getting through the crying during this call. She doesn't cry, but bear with me. This is not an expected situation. So today we're going to cover defining culture, why you should measure culture, how to measure culture, and using that data to help your company perform better. And then we'll finish with a Q&A. So we have another poll question here. Does your company have a process to assess whether employees are aligned with their company values? And a separate question with their, okay, well, let's start with the first question. Go ahead.
Yeah, so the first question is in relation to your company values. The second question is going to be in relation to your team. So same question, but one's at the company level, one's at the team level. So this first one looks like it's collecting responses now. So we'll give it about 20 seconds to get our votes in. All right, we'll give it 10 more seconds. 5 more seconds. Okay, most of you have your votes in, so I'm going to close it and share the results. Okay, so you should see the results on your screen. So 47% said yes, 37% said no, 5% said my company has not defined any values, 11% said unsure. So Juan, I'll give you a second to talk through that.
Yeah, so as you can see, there's many companies talk about their company values, and it seems like half of the group is actually assessing that. Between the 11 and 37, that's basically the other half of the group. So, the problem today and what, this seminar or webinar 3-point series is about is that half of you out there most likely are not able to assess if you have the right people aligned to your values, your company, and that leads to underperformance in individuals, in teams, in groups. And so that's what we'll be talking about today. Next slide, Cole, Charles.
All right. All right, it's launching right now. You should see it pop up here in just a second.
Yeah, now this question, everyone, the first question was around the company values. Now think about every team leader. If you have 3,000 employees, you have probably about 300 to 400 leaders. Each team has its own culture. So on this question, think really about that, not just, oh, we already have the company culture again. So do you have a process to assess if a team is aligned with its own team culture?
Okay, we'll give it about 10 seconds here. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close it. Okay, so 29% of you said yes, 41% said no, 15% said my team has not defined its culture yet, and 15% said we do not know how to measure it today. Juan, I'll kick it back to you.
Great, yeah, so this shows that even less companies and less people at companies are getting this alignment and this understanding at the team level. And so again, that's what we're going to be talking about today. Next slide. So what is culture? We're going to, at the very beginning of this webinar, define what we, Deloitte, PwC, all the large companies, all the research in the world defines as culture. And so don't take it from us, take it from all the experts out there in industrial psychology who look at organizations. So what is culture? Let's start with what it's not. Culture is not the vision of a company. And by the way, these 6 things are really, really important, but they're not the culture. Vision, every company needs it. Same with a mission. However, that's not your culture. Your culture support those things. Benefits. Everyone knows that benefits are important. We all talk about how the benefits help with employee satisfaction. The problem is that's also not your culture, because Apple and Microsoft, 2 very big, well-known companies with very distinct cultures, with products and services that come out of those cultures that are completely different, they could both give the same exact benefits. Let's say free meals every day at work. They could give, mindful Mondays where you meditate every Monday and they bring a yoga teacher to your office. They could give work from home on Fridays, and if you work there 10 years, maybe they pay for your advanced credits for education. That doesn't mean that Microsoft and Apple have anything to do with each other in terms of their culture and the products and services that come out of those companies. Next is engagement surveys. Very important to have at your company. However, it's not your culture. Here's a couple data points that all the research shows. There's been about 2 billion pulse surveys or engagement surveys across the US in the last 5 years. The reality is no one's ever used the insights from engagement surveys in the hiring process. So talent acquisition is not begging the talent development and talent management group for the engagement survey results so they can build it into the hiring process. Why is that strange? Talent acquisition's the curator of hiring for culture. So if an engagement survey actually gave insights about a company's current culture this week, this month, this year, why is it that nobody's ever thought about using engagement survey data or insights in hiring for culture fit? The other problem with engagement surveys is that it's a blip in time. Okay, an engagement survey is basically saying if people are happy or not happy. It's not really talking about, do you have the right person in the right role to align to the strategy, or i.e. the culture of that division or that role. And so engagement surveys typically don't enhance business performance. So not many people can show a direct correlation of, we did these engagement surveys and productivity improved. There are really good things you get out of them, but it's not your culture. Next, leadership. A CEO does not get replicated down through 30,000 employees. So you can ask the Uber company with 24,000 employees, they got rid of a horrible CEO who everybody was saying was creating a horrible culture at Uber. But the reality was, it's really the people that were working with that person, the direct reports. That's where leadership affects culture. They got a new Uber CEO, and nobody at Uber and 24,000 employees across the world have really noticed any change in the culture of how the company operates and what they're doing. And then a lot of companies pay, $500,000, $1 million for a big consulting firm like McKinsey, Bain, BCG to come in and do executive surveys. They'll bring in the top 10% of execs or do a survey of 10 minutes and ask them what they think the culture is and what they think the culture should be. Trying to assess the culture of a large company without actually getting the input and the data of 99% of employees doesn't really work. And that's shown why most culture transformations led from the top down have not succeeded. Many companies, and so what is culture? Culture is your people, their psychology, and the work environment that they create or establish. And what you want it to be is your aspirational culture, and you can have an intentional aspirational culture. Today, it's really defined at the top, put on coffee mugs, t-shirts, and then everybody's expected to memorize it and just be that. The reality is you have multiple cultures at your company. At Coca-Cola, who we're speaking to today, they know quite clearly that their finance and accounting department is very different culturally than their marketing department, than their sales department. Their manufacturing division is very different than other divisions in R&D. And so the nuances of culture across a company is very, very important. Okay, there was a study done by HR. Excuse me?
I think it skipped a slide there. There you go.
There was a survey done by HR.com. Actually, you know what, Charles, why don't you do the slides? It'll be easier because my hands are occupied with my baby. Thanks. There was a survey done with over 500 executives from mid to large size companies by HR.com. And what they found was that measuring culture is tricky. As we saw from our own survey, only 50% of you feel that you're assessing alignment with the company values, and even less, only 29% are aligning with team values or even measuring it. So most organizations do not know how to measure it well. This survey, over 500 people, came out with almost the same results. Only 26% felt they could measure overall corporate culture, and less than 23%, similar to ours, could measure specific culture. And most, almost 20%, 16, didn't really know the differences between corporate and team cultures. All right, Charles. The study also showed that culture, even though it's really vital to success, it's not being addressed. Okay, 9 of 10 executives think that culture and engagement are truly the most important thing in terms of their people management. But only 12% of companies actually believe they understand their culture at a deep level, not that everybody defined it and put it on a wall, and that's the mantra that we all say to all of our clients and our employees when they start onboarding. Okay, while less than half, 46%, reported that they are prepared to tackle the engagement challenge. So a lot of companies just aren't ready for it yet, they believe. And part of the problem is that people have not applied technology. In the first poll today, I took the numbers down. Engagement was 32%, turnover was 19%, performance was 14%. There was another sourcing and hiring was 28%. And it's interesting, only 8% of you said HR technology. The reality is HR technology and investing in it, and there's lots of different types of HR technology, are going to allow you to succeed in getting better engaged employees, sourcing better and hiring better, reducing turnover through software, and improving performance. A lot of people think those elements of people-related challenges are high touch, high labor, when now with technology, you can solve them in very rapid, scalable ways and very economical. Okay, Charles? So here's Deloitte's definition, very similar to ours. For them, culture is the way of getting things done. Sustained patterns of behaviors, okay, that support a shared experience or values and beliefs. Culture is what transforms individual to the collective. One of the things that Humantelligence is leading is this idea of applying data analytics and adding and aggregating all of the results of individual understanding into team, divisional, and corporate understanding. This is where things get reinforced at the team level. So it's not really a top-down philosophy that you should be thinking about. It's really a bottom-up meets top-down. Similar to the way you develop your strategies, objectives, goals, and measures, it's defined up top, but everyone bottom-up has to match that. Other data from the study that HR.com did was that employers value diversity of thought in their cultures, but most assessments don't actually assess for what we're calling diversity of thought. Cognitive styles and behaviors are not assessed frequently. The most important of the three numbers here is in the survey question about which statement's true. 1 in 4, the 24% at the end, only believe that they're assessing ways of thinking. Okay, and that's a problem. The other part of Deloitte's definition of culture, oops, I think we missed it, is that if you're able to align business strategy and culture, not only at the corporate level, okay, but at the divisional level, the team level, the functional level, all the way down to your frontline workers, okay, this will drive results without having to rely on this command and control human element of people doing everything. And technology can align that strategy to culture, okay, and that truly is transformational. And that's what we're going to be showing you over these 3 webinars. Go ahead, Charles. So a high performance culture. Sorry, everybody. This is unexpected. A high performance culture or high performance team member is one that helps the organization achieve high levels of performance and results consistently over time. Companies can look at high performers in the following in terms of performance, engagement, happiness, or even tenure, those who stay the longest. Next, Charles. There's a 3-step process to cultural alignment. In today's webinar, we're going to dive into the measuring aspect. But after you measure, you need to be able to manage culture. And then once you can manage your culture and get benchmarks as to what works in your organization, what doesn't, by team, by division, as culture, in terms of culture performance, you build it into a automated process. So now you can hire better in a much more rapid way with less subjectivity that leads again to this cycle of a higher performing culture that's aligned to what you need and what you want, not what you like. Go ahead, Charles. Charles, why don't you read the poll question?
Yeah, okay, so I'll go ahead and launch the poll here. All right, so the poll question is it clear to you why engagement surveys are not measuring culture? It's just a simple yes or no question. Should be launching here. We'll give it about 30 seconds to collect responses. Okay, we'll give it another 10 seconds. give it another 5 seconds just because there's a lot of votes still coming in. Okay, I'm going to close the poll.
Okay, that's great. And so I'm happy to see that 70% of you actually are starting to understand after 4 years of engagement surveys that it's not answering the complete picture of culture. Next poll.
Okay, have engagement surveys delivered on improved people performance as you had hoped? Yes, no, or somewhat? We'll give it about 30 seconds here.
Okay.
All right, I'm going to close the poll.
Great. So again, we see that engagement surveys are not delivering on people performance, and that's why tools are coming out like ours, but there's other companies that make software like ours that will actually help you improve performance of your people, okay, through technology and HR technology specifically. Okay, next, Charles. So why measure? Measurement lays the foundation for an organization's learning. Information sharing is leveraged in the organization towards knowledge and growth. Data-driven organizations make this possible. Measurement provides a way for departments to track their progress. So imagine looking at your culture week by week, month by month, all the way for a 3-year plan so you can have a roadmap for culture or target culture. My daughter clearly likes this concept of target culture, target roadmap for culture. Measurement, okay, ensures data-driven decisions. Again, today, people make a lot of decisions in hiring, for instance, with who they like. That's just not cutting it anymore. Who you like and hiring somebody that you get along with doesn't solve the problem for the role or for the team. And what it leads to is what Harvard Business Review, HBR Magazine, front page, the Culture Factor article last year leads to cascading thought where leaders hire 94% of their people who are just like them in terms of their psychometrics, their behaviors, their values, and even how they work. And so that is not going to lead to the most optimal problem solving for your team, for your division, for your organization. Those companies that are more competitive are the ones who are going to be able to hire for more diversity of thought. So as to summarize this slide, one of the most important components of successful organizations is measuring culture. As we all know, successful organizations measure everything. Now culture is yet another thing they're measuring in terms of other data. So what happens when you don't measure culture? Well, you get bad hires, you get cultural misalignment, you get poor management, you get lack of communication, low engagement, high turnover, all these things. Let's just summarize it. When you don't measure culture and you don't have team leaders who can articulate their own team culture and understand how to repeat it or how to hire for diversity to it, what you get is underperforming teams and underperforming organizations. And now HR as a function can impact performance, P&L, bottom line, profitability through HR technology and data. Charles? So, measure culture at your business. How do you do that? Let's get into some specifics. Now we're going to get into real tangible. Up until now, it's been all conceptual. And as my daughter's showing, she's really excited to jump into the details. So there are 28 things that you can measure that all industrial psychologists agree around the world, no matter what company, industrial psychology tool, whatever assessment instrument, okay? There are about 8 behaviors, okay? And we at our company call it a BMW framework just for ease of memory, BMW. Behaviors, there's about 8 qualities, and kind of at the end of the day shows people if they're really stable and consistent or much more change oriented. Now, there are tools out there like ours, like DISC, Predictive Index, Pymetrics, Berkman Caliper, hundreds of tools that have been around for a long time that measure behaviors. The second area of BMW that you should get to know your people at your organization are motivators, okay? And these are really kind of a lot, you know, the values, what under the iceberg, under the water that's not easily seen, what are the values, what drives people, and are they more of service and belonging and team, soft-spoken, or more kind of unique, individual, innovative, driving things as leaders? Okay, this is also important. Now, this gets really expensive. You have tools like Hogan Lominger that measure these, SHL, DDI, have some battery of instruments that measure it, but they're really expensive, typically take a half day off-site and an industrial psychologist, but you should be looking for tools that automate that and make it quicker, where it's not an hour and you don't need certification, where everybody can gain from it, not just your executives. The third piece of BMW framework is the work environment. Okay, you could have people with the same psychology in terms of behaviors and motivators, yet one person with the same psychology as another could be miserable, and that's because the work environment gives one energy. We don't work in a vacuum. Self-awareness alone, like most assessments, stop at just self-awareness of behaviors and motivators. That's not going to tell you if you're going to be engaged with your environment. Environments give you energy. We've all been there, where we go to a company and it's the same job A at company X, and job A, same role, same title, same level at company B, but one you're energized and the other you're not. And that's because the work environment is as important as your psychology. And do you like a systematic environment or a creative environment? And that's really important. And so whatever measurements you do, you need to look at that, because that's also very different in each of the cultural subsets at your company. The finance and accounting work environment, where people might be using a lot of data, might be very cautious, is very different than somebody maybe in a marketing environment at that same company, which is a completely different culture of innovation and creativity. Okay, Charles, next. Successful businesses measure BMW not only at the company level, but also at the department level, the team level, and the individual level. That way, everyone performs, from the individual self-awareness to the emotional intelligence between two people to operate better, to understand, connect, and communicate between two, to a team communicating and working better, to different teams understanding each other better, all the way down, all the way up to the company culture. That's the most comprehensive view, and that's what you should be looking to measure your organization. Next. Here's an example of that BMW framework for an individual. In terms of behaviors, some of the 8 things, if you can see that, don't worry about the words, just look at the bars on the right. On the axis of stability, this is actually my own results. I'm very deliberate and very steady, much more so than on the right side, decisive or spontaneous. Between cautious and free form at the bottom there, I'm a wash. It's actually kind of the same, depending on the context. For motivators or values, I'm kind of split. On the left side, I have half of them, helping versus self-reliant. I'm also supporting versus influence. And if you look at down on the right, I'm kind of freedom, which is unique thinking, versus order and tradition. I do care about making money a little bit more than just being of service. The third component of BMW is this concept of work environment, a creative or systematic environment. As you can see by that little table, my specific data shows that was measured that I believe more in new solutions than proven methods, and I like working with facts over just working with people. And so this is an example of measuring for one person a very comprehensive understanding. Now the challenge is there's a lot of tools that only measure behaviors. They're not going to help you get optimal performance for one person, let alone a team. Some tools only measure for motivators or values. Again, just like your company has values, it doesn't guarantee that everybody's going to be working optimally in a division or a group. And then of course, work environment, really key. What gives someone energy? Next, Charles. Now, if you roll the data up, and this is where technology comes into play, you can see snapshots of your team culture. So imagine understanding the culture, what you just saw for me, you get to see for my entire team. And so this is the data from our team, a very diverse team in terms of behaviors. Half of us are on the left, stability oriented, and half are change oriented. So we're able as an organization, as a team, to flex when things need to be really changed and quick. And for example, some of the elements there, decisive decision making, spontaneous, and being freeform. But at the same time, we have people who can operate the other way. So it leads to an optimal outcome on our performance. I can also use this to pick people for projects. If I need a change-oriented person to lead a real disruptive team or project, I'll go over to the right side and pick people from that group. If I need someone really cautious to make sure that if there's a product defect and they're going to do a recall, for example, in retail or manufacturing, and it could lead to a lawsuit, I definitely don't want the free-form, change-oriented folks on the right who are decisive. I'm going to try to pick people to create that team who are cautious on the bottom left and steady and reflective and deliberate to make sure that this important project gets delivered the correct way and minimizes any kind of potential risk. Next, Charles. This is a finding from our HR.com white paper partnership. They found that higher performing culture organizations are 3 times more likely to assess the cognitive preferences and working styles, that's what we call working environment, compared to the lower performing counterparts. The takeaway here is if you just have a tool that measures behaviors and you're not looking at work styles and work environment, it's not going to be very predictive, and it's not going to really lead to understanding your culture and measuring your true culture. Next. Creating a high performance culture. So senior leaders can build and maintain a high performing culture by teaching managers to lead in highly motivating ways. So tools like this can teach leaders to be better leaders. It'll give them insights to be a different leader to every subordinate. At Procter & Gamble, I got promoted from an assistant brand manager with no direct reports to a brand manager where I had 6 direct reports. I thought my job as a 26-year-old would get much easier. Boy, was I in for a surprise, as many of you leaders here know. My boss, who was a AVP at the time, said, no, Juan, your job gets much more challenging. You now need to figure out how to communicate, motivate, and influence all 6 individuals differently. You, Juan, as a leader, need to change. Now, the problem with that is, I figured it out, but most leaders don't, and it took me a while. Imagine a tool, if you've measured everyone in a team environment, that a leader can get at their fingertips through technology on their handhelds, in their emails, when they write an email, or they're going to a meeting in calendar invite. You click and you get the insights instantly, or right before you do a one-on-one with your subordinate, how to manage, how to motivate, how to influence, how to communicate differently with each person. The second bullet point basically discusses that, sorry, Charles, I didn't finish that one. The second bullet point shows that CEOs believe that you should make a business case for culture. Okay, you need a budget. Most companies today don't have a budget for culture other than, their budget for engagement surveys or, the pizza on Fridays and just activity-based culture stuff. Like, let's go have fun this weekend, or let's do an offsite. You should appropriate budget for technology, okay, to measure culture. And there are tools, many tools out there that you can enlist that are quite economical, where you can get insights for your entire company, no matter how big you are, and you'll be surprised. One study of a bank branch manager showed that offering leadership training and measuring culture related to that training on their teams led to a 20% increase in credit card sales and a 47% increase in personal loan sales. Next, Charles. So what's the psychology of this BMW framework that you guys should think about for your company? For each of your teams, divisions, and the whole company, you should look at the behaviors. Those are things that are going to drive your culture, how a person acts or reacts to the demands of the role. Next, you should look at their motivators, what's under the iceberg, under the water. What motivates them will initiate your culture, how a person's motivated to complete work or perceive work. And thirdly, the ideal work component sustains culture, the people, places, and procedures and processes in place that a person needs to thrive and remain in a role. Imagine going to a company that's completely structured, Six Sigma, continuous improvement, and then going to a company that doesn't have any of that. It would be a shock, even for the same role that you have. It would be a very different culture feel. Go ahead, Charles. Today, the prevailing tools used are inefficient and inaccurate. We've talked about some of these pulse climate surveys, these engagement surveys. Knowing your turnover rate doesn't really tell you if you have the right culture or not. It tells you that you have a problem keeping people, but it doesn't tell you what your culture is. And all these employee assistance programs, good to have them in place. You need that, but it's also not your culture that's driving performance. Next. These tools, as we mentioned, fail to show the bigger issues contributing to turnover. Employees want to feel valued. They want to see personal goals fulfilled. They want to share similar work styles when they do work, and they want to have feedback based on their specific needs. Next. Many of you have used kind of profiles around some of these benchmarks of behaviors where a company comes and tells you, hey, we've surveyed and know the profile of a top salesperson, right, in your industry, or a top marketing person. So we know how to find people based on this test. The problem with that is it's not taking into consideration your culture. So imagine the consultant who's a director level consultant or an engagement manager level from Bain Consulting, who then goes over to McKinsey. Same person, same company. They could have been a superstar at BCG or Bain. They go to McKinsey and they fail. The reason they could fail is because of the culture, and vice versa. Same with a salesperson at Merck who then goes to AstraZeneca. It's a culture fit issue, not a skills experience issue. That explains the varying company cultures. Let's skip, Charles, the rest of this. So uncovering predictive performance. It's been proven by research that only 30% of predictive performance for any role at any level relates to the IQ. The other 70% is EQ, or emotional intelligence. Psychometric tools are going to be able to give you insights into that EQ, the cultural and motivational elements of your individual employees, two people working together, teams, leaders, all the way up to the company. So a successful sales director at Coca-Cola might fail at Pepsi, and now you can filter that out before you hire them and save a lot of turnover costs and pain. The resume is no longer telling the full picture of a hire. That's one of the reasons why LinkedIn, although everyone used it, lost half of their market share and 50% of their market cap. They went from 100 billion to 50 billion because people using LinkedIn over time realized it did not impact turnover. It just fills a role. Filling a role is not the goal. It's filling a role with someone who will stay long-term, who fits with the culture. And that's emotional intelligence driven, not resume skills driven. Next. You can use tools like this to measure culture across stores or multi-unit sites. So Starbucks could use it to measure the culture of the top stores in Florida across their motivators or values and behaviors versus their bottom stores in Florida, and actually get insights as to why stores are performing. And culture is unique and it must be measured individually. So different regions in Miami, where it's all Latin customers and Latin employees, you can have a very different culture for baristas at a Starbucks and what the experience is as a customer. And so high net promoter scores at a Starbucks where the baristas are touching customers, holding their babies, picking them up, talking about personal questions to customers, a 15-minute experience, all of that where everybody's involved in the conversation in line, that's great experience. And that's the culture of Starbucks in Miami. If you put that same high-performing team with the same jobs and the same store format, merchandising products and services in New York City, where people want to get their coffee, get out, and don't have any barista talk to me, ask me questions, or let alone touch my baby, that's going to be a failure and a low-performing culture. So as you can say, not only in the same job, but even at the same company, you could have nuanced different cultures, and you need to be able to measure that to optimize performance in every area of your company. Next. You can also customize measurements to get insights, kind of like we call ourselves Moneyball for HR. If you saw the movie Moneyball with Brad Pitt, that baseball team leveraged data for the first time ever and got a better performing baseball team by leveraging the data and the insights about players and teams and how to put them together. The same should be done. I'm not suggesting everybody go and hire Brad Pitt. That would create chaos. But the same should be done in applying data and analytics, okay, to understanding performance. So you could take your high salespeople, high-performing salespeople that you know who they are, they're the ones who get bonus, they perform, they don't get fired, to your low-performing salespeople. And tools like this will then demonstrate across behaviors, motivators, and work styles, what are the elements? Is it 3, is it 6 of the 28? That everybody agrees affect human nature and how we behave and think and are driven. What are those 4 or 5 things? In this case, on the left, the high-performing salespeople, okay, are driven by financial security, self-reliance, and influence, while the low performers on the right, that red circle, knowledge, the blue circle, helping and belonging, very different drivers of motivation. And so now you can train bad performers, but also then use this benchmarking for hiring and avoiding bad interviews and hiring people just like themselves to improve performance. Next, Charles. We have one manufacturer of furniture, the largest in the country, I think in all of the Americas, which had 100,000 interviews a year, 20,000 employees, and they had 100% turnover. And we went and saved them $4 million just by giving them a tool that they could then measure why people performed. And the low performers were too decisive, and the high performers in their organization were very deliberate and steady, but they didn't know how to interview for that at the scale of 100,000 interviews a year. So they were hiring wrong. Next slide. They also found that high performers were not so focused on money, financial security, like the low performers. Yet they've been hiring for the last 7 years, pay for performance mentality, because their manufacturing workers who were the best made the most money. Anyone would conclude, therefore, let's hire pay for performance motivated people. The reality is no. They have a batch manufacturing process, so people were really motivated by helping, supporting, and belonging, ended up being the best performers, and by default made the most money, but not because they cared about money. Next. Whoop. This is so exciting. She's sneezing on this stuff. Thank you, Aura. So the BMW difference in this case study, the client was only able to address and assess properly because of the combination of both behaviors and motivators. If they had just used a behavioral test, they would have, which they've done for 7 years actually, they would have never been able to identify truly the combination of the psychology of what a leading performer would be. Okay. So that's how they were able to save $4 million and reduce turnover by over 40%. Go ahead, Charles. Most measuring tools have a top-down approach that is not addressed by BMW. So you need to really do a bottom-up of almost all of your employees to truly understand them, not surveys of your execs, asking them what they think the culture is. Next. And your best performers are going to be hidden, and you're not going to know what drives them. And having one competency model for leadership, you're going to lose a lot of your high-performing minority population. Because if a company has very little minorities in their leadership, the models that you currently have for competency models for leadership aren't going to take into account different competency models. So, for instance, a millennial leads a team and is respected very differently than someone who's 50 or 60 as a leader. So you should have competency models and tools like this. You could pull out all of your high potential Hispanics, African Americans, LGBTQ, millennials, and they could show you a model like this. These are the competency models for these different types of people. You can't keep trying to develop leaders who are millennials with your old school competency models, and tools like this will avoid this problem. Next. The best example, recent example, which we just added to this presentation, is Ryan Tannehill. I got to know him for 7 years as a fan of the Miami Dolphins. We were terrible. We didn't win anything. He was just average. Everybody said he had the great skills and qualities, but he was on the wrong team. Well, we got rid of him for nothing, I think, no picks or anything, and the Tennessee Titans picked him up. And guess what? You put the right person on the right team, and then they can succeed. He ended the season with the highest QBR quarterback rating in the NFL, even though he was one of the lowest 20, bottom 10% of 32 teams with the Miami Dolphins for 7 years. Culture and fit, just like the movie Moneyball in baseball, it applies to football, it applies to your companies, it applies everywhere. Culture is key for performance. Next. EQ makes a difference, okay? You should start to think about making promotions and hires based on data and merit, not bias. Leverage HR technology to guarantee diversity of thought. Measure teams to see if they are diverse in thought or not. Tools like ours will allow you to go and map out your company and see where you have real problems in diversity of thought. Okay, and this will help your hiring process and when you put teams internally together to solve complex problems and to win in the marketplace. Next. So, rhetorical question, not a poll. If only 12 minutes could give you insights to improve the diversity of thought, the performance, and understanding of your teams, would you make the time? Next. We have about 7 or 8 minutes for any questions. Be happy to take them. Charles, if they've been asking them on the chat, maybe you read them to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've actually got quite a few that have come in so far. And I'll start off with a couple of more logistical questions. So I had a number of questions about whether or not we'd be sending out the slide deck and other materials. Yeah, so there will be an email that comes from me following this webinar with those slides. They're also in your handouts section. If you look at the GoToWebinar control panel under handouts, you can see that I've attached 3 things there. But for the recording itself, I'll need a couple of hours for that to buffer, and then I will send that out to everyone. So I think that's pretty much it with the logistical questions. All right, so Juan, I've got one here from Robert. It's one thing to know what motivates your staff and applicants. How do you know which motivators contribute to employee success?
Great question. So maybe this was asked earlier in the presentation. I thought I had shown a part answer to that. Basically, what you do is look at your successful employees. In a system like ours, you can actually tag and say, okay, John Smith, Mary Johnson, Jose, Perez, LaQuasha Williams, all these different people, Wendy Chang, these are our highest and most successful and happiest employees. Let's look at their data as a group. And so even though it's not a team per se, you could pull them as a group with a system like this, aggregate the data and get the insights as to what's common among them. What motivates these people, these 6 or 7, or you could even, for large companies, it could be a pool, a group of 100 or 1,000 out of 10,000. What are the common things? And the side-by-side bubble chart is where you would do that, that show why these people seem to be successful. And so a tool like this, and that would be impossible to do as a human being, the tool will then pull up the things that are most similar and what % they're similar. Next.
Okay, how do you address the challenge of joining a new company where the employees are long tenured with an entrenched entitlement culture?
Yeah, that's a tough one. So candidates, and this is kind of from the perspective of a candidate, applicants and candidates don't know the culture of companies. They read on the websites, you know, they'll hear company presentations at the universities saying that we're this, this, and this. Until you get into the company, you don't really know the culture, let alone of the team or division you're at. So from their perspective, unless some of our clients actually measure the culture and put it on their websites with data, so unless a company has that exposure of their culture data measured on the website, applicants won't know. Now, as head of HR, looking at your company, knowing this problem, this dynamic, from that perspective, the CHRO and head of talent management who wants people and head of talent engagement, you want people to be on board and be happy. So from that perspective, measuring it and showing in the onboarding process a new applicant how they're similar or different from the team and the division, and it's okay if they're different, that's the first step. Okay, showing with data that, let's say, the whole team's decisive and you, the new person, is really deliberate, it'll help that person say, you know what, the whole team's really decisive. They make decisions quickly. They're really innovative and change quickly. I might not be able to sit on emails too long. I might have to respond quicker. You can actually change and get people to understand each other to make that onboarding smoother, to show a divisional head that all they keep doing is hiring the same profile. And so with data, HR can show leaders who hire that maybe their model of hiring is not working, and then you can layer over, let's say, the top 5 divisions and what the culture looks like for those, and maybe the low divisions, and you could show that leader, hey, you're always not performing and you have the least diverse group of people. Now that we have data, can we actually now tell you how to hire and use a tool to help you hire better? Next.
Okay, so Juan, this is in regards to our tool. Have these tools been statistically validated so they can be used as part of the hiring process without legal concerns?
Great question. All of you, whether you're a small company or large company, now large companies, if you're listening, you know that you have 25 lawyers and 10 industrial psychologists that are going to go and review the tools and the instruments. For smaller companies, you don't have all of that infrastructure around risk. And you can get sued if a tool is used that's not been validated technically. So you need to ask those questions about any tool that you use. Now, Humantelligence, our tool is 30 years in being validated. When I started this company, I bought the scientific tool from Russ Watson. He had developed it over 30 years. And so now we own this tool, and he validates it every 3 years. It also goes through the adverse impact study. We are also, as a platform, GDPR compliant, and now we align with the regulations coming out in California. So it is accurate in what it measures, and you can use it for hiring. And no tool out there, any of them, can prevent you from getting sued. However, you won't lose a lawsuit if it's been validated technically to be measuring what it says it does, as is in our case. Next.
Okay, perfect. We've got about 2 more minutes here. We probably have time for 2 more questions. And somebody actually just wrote in and said part of your answer on the first question was cut off, but I did hear it, and it did get recorded. So when I send out the recording, that answer will be there. Okay, so Juan, I wonder whether culture fit and diversity of thought are found within the same person, or whether it's 2 different extremes at scale. Can you have both? Is culture fit hindering diversity, rehiring the same type of people? Question mark.
Repeat the beginning of that. That was a lot.
Yeah, so I wonder whether culture fit and diversity of thought are found within the same person, or whether it's 2 different extremes at scale.
Yeah, so when we say culture fit at Humantelligence, and what you should think about culture fit, it's not just having someone that fits and looks like everyone else. If you're a R&D or an engineering team and you want problem solving, you want to make sure that the right culture fit for that role that you're hiring for let's say a team of 10 people, that the next person adds the most different way of thinking. And so within any one person, you could have those extremes. One person joining a team could lead to more diversity of thought, but that same person joining another team could lead to too much similarity of thought. And so within one person, you do have the 2 extremes of diversity of thought and same old, same old. I mean, companies need to think this way. It's a really good question. Companies need to think this way. There are some roles in certain divisions that you want to clone people, okay? Usually they work alone. A carry the bag salesperson. If you find that there's a profile for your best salespeople that are out there doing it by themselves, just clone that and hire a heck of a lot of them in terms of the psychometric profiles. Now, you do want diversity of ethnicity and what traditionally have been seeing diversity by the U.S. Census. But you can get the same personality traits and the way of working among a white, a black, Hispanic, Asian, etc. Now, for the rest of the company, and same with call center agents, right? You don't want 100 call center agents all being very different and unique and thinking differently. They're just reading a script and getting through it, and whoever does it best, go find and hire as many of those as possible. Now, for the rest of the company, consulting firms, professional services, even at headquarters of any company, problem solving is really important, and strategy and complexity. You want diverse teams, and so there you want to make sure that you're not having a manager hire everyone they like. Imagine the 5 finalists go into an interview in a marketing interview session, Super Friday, and they come in, and the team of 5 interviewers, they get together at the end of the day and say, okay, they can all do the job, they all have the right skills, they're the finalists, we have 500 applicants, we've got the final 5, which one we're going to hire? And they all put on the board their favorite order, and everybody loves Mary. Second, everybody loves John, and everybody loves Steve the least, let's say the 5th ranked person. And then you start to ask, well, why did nobody like Steve? Oh, well, he argued with me on a hypothetical I gave him, and another person says the same. It turns out Steve thought differently than the 5 people interviewing him in that marketing team. Well, guess what? If that marketing team wants to continue to hire, my daughter doesn't want to hear anymore. If that marketing team continues to hire the same old way of thinking, they will not be the best marketing team for that company, and they will fail that company in delivering marketing messages to the market. Now, if they hire John, on the resume, he can do the job. He just thinks very differently than them. Tools like ours show that selection optionality, shows that trade-off. Today, people don't even think about the trade-off. Today, people just think, who is like me? Next.
Okay, perfect. We're over time, but I do want to ask one more question because I think it's a really good one to end on. And for those of you who we didn't answer the questions for, there's quite a few more. We will follow up with you after to answer your questions. But Juan, what is a good performance of an employee related to the cultures?
What's a good what?
So when you're looking at performance, what's considered good performance? So we actually have a slide earlier on about that. So like what do you consider high performance and what do you want to benchmark?
Oh, right. So a lot of companies measure performance where it's related to revenue, like salespeople who's delivering the best sales, where it's related to manufacturing, who has the least defects. I think for every company, the KPIs around performance, those metrics differ. Some clients, really large companies, surprisingly, don't have a way of pushing a button and seeing who their best performers are. So what they do is at the end of the day, every manager, even if it's subjective, can make a best guess who's performing optimally, and usually those people are the ones who get bonus at the end of the year and who don't get laid off. Now that leads to subjectivity in hiring for continuing. The negative or downfall you should be careful is what led to the performance in that role or that team or that group for the last 5 years might be completely different the next 5 years. Picture Best Buy, the sales associate before the internet. You needed someone who was very knowledge-based, who was deliberate at Best Buy. So when a customer walked in, there was no internet. That sales associate at Best Buy had to explain all the products, all the gadgets, all the features, super smart. They would have to take 30 minutes, a lot of information, take their time, very service-oriented, right? Well, guess what? The internet comes. Nobody goes into Best Buy and wants 30-minute lecture on all the features. They've done that at home, online. And so what leads to high performance today at Best Buy in that role is completely different than what it was. So if somebody kept hiring their past high performers without thinking, given the internet or given the business challenge that's changed and what customers want this next year, 2 years, in 2002, 3, 4, we need a different culture in our stores. So every company should leave here with this thought: your culture should not be stagnant, and every role in every division should think about how culture changes to align with the new strategy. And if you tell me that your culture shouldn't change every year, well, guess what? That means you're saying your strategy shouldn't change every year. And if strategy is changing every year for your products, services, your culture should be adapting as well. I'll end it on that. Thanks so much. My daughter appreciates you letting me have her participate. Little Aura is a handful, but we all love her so much. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thanks, Juan. Thank you to everybody in our audience today. We will see you on Wednesday, February 19th at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific time for part 2 on managing culture. Remember, as a part of that, there's a culture mapping that you can take part in. So let me know if you want to do a team culture map up to 20 people. You'll actually get a survey once you close out of this, so that you can let us know that you want to get one of those done prior to our second webinar session. Again, thank you all for coming out today. I will send out follow-up materials and the recording right after this webinar. Thanks.